Greetings. I am Andona Sananda Kumara. In this moment, we share a wonderful conversation with author Linda Cowley Wilks, a beautiful soul whose journey of expanding consciousness ventured into the realm of a walk-in soul embodiment. Seemingly divinely prepared for the eventual fulfillment of this soul-level agreement, Linda shares openly of growing up with a father who fully supported and nurtured her intuitive abilities. She also discusses the ways that awareness has been maintained throughout her life experience. This is a conversation packed with tons of spiritual insight and wisdom. So we invite you to relax into that sacred space of the heart, the very center of you, and receive.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I thank you for having me on your platform.
Yeah.
Yes, my name is Linda Cowley Wilks, and I am an author, as you see, Spiritual Phenomena and Walking Souls. This book pretty much was narrated 50% through my guides, and I had assistance with from the Ascended Masters. And so this is something that I do. I write all the time, and I am divinely guided, so I get downloads daily. I facilitate and assist in healing. So I consider myself an energy healer, but I assist the human in healing their self. Also, I am a motivational speaker, and I love speaking on anything regarding the mind, body, spirit connection, and to help us become in alignment, especially with the new energies coming on this planet and the planetary shift. It's very important to me, and this is my purpose for being on the planet. Also, I am an intuitive spiritual consultant. I help my clients to understand who they are, what the possibilities are futuristically. Often their past lives come into play, and I'm able to weave that information with who they are today to help them get in alignment with the skills that they already have, and they can build upon them.
I am so taken with your story because you've always been open to a certain degree. And as a child, you had dreams, and they were prophetic dreams. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was so fascinating reading this story because you mentioned in the story that your dad was the one who encouraged you to explore those dreams, to maintain that. He was almost like a coach, coaching you in that regard. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, my father was very instrumental in me maintaining, exploring my dreams, defining them, interpreting them, and embellishing them. And so I thought it was just a natural aspect of all humans until I began to talk about it when I was in my late teens. And I found that others weren't interested, or they had never heard of such things. So I had to really bring it more intricately in my inner self and not share it with other people because they would think you were weird. So my father, he worked he had to get up to go to his job at 4:00 in the morning. And it was only my brother and myself. And he's a few years older than me, 3 as a matter of fact. And so I used to say we would make my father wake us up. And we wanted him to cook us an egg and make us coffee. And he would put it on a saucer, and it would be all with all the cream and sugar. And he would ask, "What did you dream?" And I would tell him. And evidently it stuck with him because when he would come home from work, he would ask me about the dreams. And as I began to get older, he began to share his dreams with me. And I would begin to interpret his dreams. And it was like a daily interaction, the dream conversations. And when I was a very young girl, my father, he would call me from outside playing. I might have been 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, young girl. And he would he would call my grandmother who lived in the South, and also his twin brother who lived in East St. Louis, Illinois, because I was born here in Chicago. And he would say, tell your grandmother or tell your uncle or tell whoever he called, tell them what you dream. And I would tell them the aspects of the dream. And then I would run out and keep playing. And that was the way that was started. And I really thought it was normal.
Was there any history of other seers or intuitives within your family, people who had the same ability as you?
Now that's something that I have pondered here, I'll say lately, but my father passed in 2003, so I never had an opportunity to ask him those questions. And I don't know if if it was generational, because my understanding today is that some of those innate skills have been embellished from our ancestors, and it just passes down. It is up to us to continue with it. So I think it's a possibility, although I was not informed that it was.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you maintain that throughout school, like through your schooling? Did you maintain your openness or did you shut down at some point?
Well, I never shut down
Yeah.
because my father we always talked about it. I just didn't share it outside of the home. But there was one time, couple of times, I I was at my father's home, and I had moved out. I was married. I was young, and I would always dream. I'd take a nap at the house. And so this one particular day, I took a nap, and I dreamed of the Illinois State Lottery. It was only 3 digits. And so my father was on his back porch. He was talking to his neighbors next door. And I came out and I was like, I had a dream, and I was telling them, and I spoke it. And all those people played that number and they won. So that within itself, and I would dream like that. And I had one cousin, he would bug me, go to sleep. He'd call me, go to sleep, so that he could get a specific number. He wanted to win. But I never inspired those dreams, they just came.
At this time, were you in contact with your guidance? Did you have guides who were speaking to you? Were you in contact with them?
I did, but I didn't know they were guides.
Mm,
I wasn't aware because no one had ever told me about guides.
yeah.
In church, you hear about angels, but they seem to have been at a distance, something way outside of you. But I never, and that was rare that anybody talked about an angel. So I didn't know that until I got a little older, and I understood that there was a hierarchy
Mhm.
of beings over us. And once I began to understand that, that allowed me to know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's fascinating that your dad coached you because him taking an interest in that allowed you to remain open. It never got programmed out of you, that ability, that innate ability, because basically all kids come in open, right? And they get
Right,
programmed out of it. Like I was a kid, I could see things, I would see shadow beings and all those things, but I never had that person that would sit and actually listen and take those comments seriously. And I think to myself, how different would the world be if parents were coaches in that way? They allow kids to remain open in that way. That would be that would go a long way in making sure that we maintain our connectedness to the oneness, the unified field, right? Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So you came into some health challenges eventually, and I so resonated with how you articulated that within the book, because you seem to be doing all the right things. The career was going great. Everything, life was good, and this kind of came out of left field and blindsided you. And the one
Yes.
question you asked in the book was, why me? Which is that question that everybody has a tendency to ask themselves. And so when you went down that rabbit hole of exploration, did you discover a why me, an answer to that question?
I did.
Yeah.
I received the answer. It was necessary for me to keep my life force here on third dimension, that I could do the work that was necessary. And so the way the physical body was deteriorating, I needed all of what I received to boost me into who I am today and to give me a second opportunity at life. And also, I needed the strength, the power, and the skills of the new soul that walked in. I needed that in order to do the work. So evidently, I had done all the work that I could do
Mm.
through the physical body
Yeah.
and through the soul that I came in here with. And so the framework was set. So I was ideal for this particular new soul to come in. And there are new souls that come in, and there are different frameworks in the human,
Yeah.
because the information and the soul that I received was necessary for the people that I was to interact with, I was to share my journey with. And then there are other people who have studied, let's say, physics, and they are intricately connected with those ideas. And so that person, I'm just using that as an example, they
Yeah.
would be able to be in a different segment of society that I may
Yeah.
not. So
Yeah.
I understood the why, and I can look back and I can appreciate the why.
Yeah.
But when you're going through such pain and misery, you cannot see that light as bright as it really is.
Right. Yeah, those sorts of things are better seen in hindsight, right? You learn that you've really come to understand the lessons in hindsight. Julia Cannon is Dolores Cannon's daughter. She wrote a book called Soul Speak, and it talks about how discomfort and pain is in the body is a message to the body.
Mhm.
In your case, do you think yours was there was a message in there to you, or do you think it was all a matter of that being the process or the avenue by which the walk-in would have opportunity to come into the physical? Do you think it was more orchestrated in
I
design in
think it
that
was
way?
orchestrated prior to my birth here on planet Earth.
Yeah.
Uh, and I clearly understand Dolores Cannon's, her perceptions, beliefs, and she was a marvelous woman
Mm.
who had a lot of divine information. But when it comes to what I went through, I don't think that it was meant as a lesson. It's sort of like Louise Hayes. I haven't read Dolores Cannon's daughter's book, but Louise
Mhm.
Hayes, she always had an explanation and a definition for different ailments.
Yeah.
And so each one represents a particular ideal that needs to be worked with.
Right.
But I don't think this was meant for me at the time. It was just a contractual agreement that was made prior to my being here, that I would be needed. I would come onto this planet, and I would lose my mother at 9 months old. Her goal was to get me here. Spirit has
Mhm.
showed me this. That was her goal, to birth me here, so that I could work out this divine plan.
Right.
and operate in my purpose. So everything that happened, even with my father remarrying, and I had a stepmother, she was extremely stern. On a scale from 1 to 10, she was at an 11. But as I look back, because I resented it, but as I look back, I needed that because of the child that I was. It created discipline in me that I needed. And so I look back over a lot of situations, illnesses, all type of situations, where I was in situations where I was not treated well, but Spirit showed me and my guides told me that your most harsh teachers were your best teachers because you got the lesson.
Yeah. Wow.
So
That
I
shows.
began to appreciate all of them,
Yeah.
but it took
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, I'm sure they show you that contrast between um, that high vibrational space and then that extreme low vibration, give you that contrast to give you opportunity to become more aware of who you are, to grow in awareness of yourself. So when you were faced with those health challenges, one of the things you were faced with was the prospect of death. That was your prognosis. And there's a lot of fear that's involved in hearing that. And that's one of the things that you communicated in the book, having that your name in the same sentence with death was such an impact. Why do you think that was such an impact? Why do you think that was such a hard thing to hear?
It was hard to hear because the way society in the Western Hemisphere, how
Yeah,
they present and define the idea of death. And so we are programmed into fear of the unknown
yeah.
because we are taught not to be inquisitive
Mhm.
of certain things and certain ideals. And so for me, that fear, and it was probably in my subconscious somewhere, and it just came to the consciousness and it sort of lingered. And there was this female doctor, she was from India. And when she came to uh, my room in the hospital, and she stood at the end of my bed and she shook my foot and she says, Linda, it is good you got into the hospital when you did, because you would have been dead in a day, maybe two. That rung into my mind. It stayed there. And so that really is that's the first idea that was planted into me, that death was close to me
Mm.
until what occurred in that nursing home, that I was close to death. And so I had to work with those fears because I always put an invisible guard at the door of my mind.
Mhm.
And I started doing this in my late teens or early 20s. And I put an invisible guard at the door of my mind to protect my mind from receiving negative or dark thoughts.
Mm.
And this is how I wanted to program myself and not let outside forces program me to be what I did not want to be. And so, with that in mind, I was able to catch these thoughts on fear and fight them off. I just had the words in me, and I had the energy in me, and the fortitude and the will to say, hey, I am whole, perfect, and complete.
Yeah.
And I had all these ideas. And then I had read so many books on near death experiences and so many books on miraculous healings from other countries, other cultures, and other spiritual practices. So I had so many ideas about it that I had a belief
Mhm.
that death is not always a winner over the physical body.
I think our perception of death would be so different if everybody truly understood the who and the what of them, because we see many people see this physical body as it, like that's it. that's all it is to you, but that's not it. You are a soul having a human experience. The soul encompasses the body. The body is not the end of you, right? The consciousness itself is eternal and it persists. But I don't think a lot of people understand it. But I think if we did as a collective, then there would be a whole different perception of death. There wouldn't be so much fear. And then on top of that, when you have fear, you're dredging up all of these thoughts, all these illusory thoughts that basically compound any health challenges that you might be having. Because as we all know, thoughts create things. Thoughts manifest your reality. So yeah, that's a big thing that affects us. I think it would be so different if we had a better understanding, a clearer understanding of
And
that.
um, there is an understanding, but it's not pondered. In most religious teachings, and especially African Americans, they consider themselves Christians, and they believe in the Holy Bible, and it says the spirit never dies. But because they've also been taught historically in our ancestors, that we should never look to the right, never look to the left, and never question. So if you never question, you'll never get an answer. And so you'll never, ever get fully enlightened because you are not inquisitive. But if they would ask the question, even just to themselves, they'd get an answer. If they would ask, well, if the spirit never dies, where does it go? Where does it live? What does it do? If we would ponder these questions, it would broaden our understanding. And if we would study other spiritual texts, we would know that it's just a transformation.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And then when you know this, and you know that there's possibly an opportunity to come back here on the wheel of karma. And then if you know that, you know this is not the end. And then the understanding will come that you need to just get as much wisdom, as much knowledge as you can, so that when you come back, wherever you go, you will have, your knowledge will have mushroomed, and you'll bring that in through the essence of your soul. This is why we say, and most people say, when a child has displayed some unusual talents, let's say a toddler, the average woman is going to say, that child has been here before.
Yeah.
But then they don't believe in reincarnation.
Contradiction. Yeah. Right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Wow. Yeah. For the longest time, I had a friend and we would talk and she would always ask, did I have any questions? And at that point, I wasn't even at a place where I knew what questions to ask, because I feel like at that point back then I was so entrenched in the program that I was just operating by default, right? And when you're operating in default, doing the same loops and patterns all the time, you never have a question because you're always doing the same thing. You always know what to expect. You're going to work at the same time every day, cooking dinner at the same time every day, doing all these routines at the same time every day, rather than being fully present within the now, moving from the now, allowing yourself to move on the basis of the impulse rather than a pattern or a habit. But when I broke that, when she asked those questions, it caused me to think for a moment, to stop and think for a moment. And then I started to break that pattern. But it wasn't until I was able to break it in that way, I kind of having my consciousness expanded, listening to some of her fantastical stories, which I thought were fantastical at the time. They broke that pattern and caused me to take a moment and think. And that's when I really started to ask the questions. And then that's when I kind of started to expand in this thing. Yeah. But I had to break that loop, because before I didn't have a question at all. Yeah.
And see, I think this is the problem that's hindering not only the spiritual growth, the mental evolution of a lot of people, because as we began to put new information into our brain, we open up new paths of
Yeah.
understanding. This is
Right.
why we can read a book and we
Mm.
can go turn around, read that book again and get new information.
Yeah.
And if you read it a third time, you're going to get more information.
Yes.
Simply because every time you put new information in, you're going to open up a new pathway.
Right.
And so this is how we learn. But if
Yes.
we never, ever open up pathways to new knowledge and all of our information is just being bombarded through programs and other people's beliefs, then those avenues close off
Right.
and it's very difficult to open them up. This is why many people still do not read.
Yeah. Yeah, it even reaches farther than reading. It's about your habits, what you do every day. Because when I always tell this story because I thought it was so fascinating because it was fascinating when I realized I kind of snapped out of myself when I realized what I was doing. But I would walk in a room and I would always make sure I turn the lights off when I leave the room. And so my kids when they would come upstairs or go in a room, they would always leave the lights on, and I found myself fussing at them because they would always leave lights on in the room. And then one day my son asked, "Well, why do I need to turn the light off? I mean, what is the light hurting? Why do I need to turn the light off?" And then I asked myself, "Why does he need to turn the light off? Why does he need to turn the light off?" And then I thought about the fact that when I was young, my mom would always say, "Turn the lights off. You're gonna run up the electricity bill. You got to turn the lights off every time." And that was something I carried into my being a mom, right? With my
Mhm.
kids, I didn't really have a basis for that. I really could have cared less, but it was something that I had picked up because that's what I was ingrained with, but it wasn't even mine. It wasn't even my thought. I didn't have a basis for it. It was something I had picked up from my mother and kind of passed forward to them. And so I was able to, get rid of that thing. But yeah, it peeks into every aspect of life. Every aspect of life is how it
It
goes.
does. And this is why we need to do what I call self assessment.
Yeah.
We need to monitor our thinking, why we think like we think, and whose thoughts. And we must do it often, over and over and
Right.
over again. It's nonstop. And we have to ask because I had to ask those questions. Um, and I still ask if thoughts come up and I need to look at them or ponder them. And I have asked myself, why do I think like this? And it goes into every aspect of your life. And I
Yeah.
had to think back to when my father was born and his values were set. I'll give him 20 years. Those
Mhm.
values were set for that time frame, that social, financial, that whatever was going on in that time. And so then here I come, because my father was an older father. Here I come 20 years later. And then he gives me his values. And then they're set in me in 20 years. So now the values that he embodied, they don't work. They weren't working in this time frame. So now I had to reevaluate them and
Yeah.
modify them to fit so that I could be effective today.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And that's every
Yeah.
thought we think. They
Right.
came from someone generally outside of us until we start to become an independent thinker.
That's absolutely right. The other thing that ties into that, or that tied into that for me, was assessing the labels that I had of myself, the way that I define myself, assessing
Mhm.
those labels and looking really at how I view those things, because the way I define being a mom might be different to the way somebody else defines being a mom, but my definition is going to dictate how I operate within that role, right? And having
Yeah.
the courage to kind of release my attachment to a defined role and allowing myself to simply be within a space. Like a wife has to do these things, a husband has to do these things. And releasing attachment to all of those roles has been tremendous because it sets you free, because your belief is literally the boundary to your experience. You can't leap the fences of your own belief. You can't grow beyond that. So you really have to kind of let that go in order to allow yourself to expand into unknown realms, because you can't get there if your belief is hindering you. They say seeing is believing, but really is believing is seeing, right?
It is.
Believing is seeing. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah.
It really is interesting because what has happened, a lot of what was going on during another social era and how children were treated, it was just carried over and programmed into the next generation, which was different because our understanding had increased. Evolution is always ongoing. And so we're learning more, consciousness expanded. So the things that were done in the past, you couldn't do them. But we were still carrying them out because, like you say, carrying out the programs.
Right. Yeah. This is how it is with the school system, right? You have kids coming in who are so advanced and they think so fast, right? They think so fast, but they're being taught at a pace that's just so insanely slow. So you have kids who sit up in class and they need something to do with their hands. That's why they have these fidget spinners and all these things, where you have old school teachers who don't understand that a kid just needs to move their hands. Their hands have to be in motion, but they can pay attention while they're moving their hands. But you have these traditional teachers, old school teachers, who say, well, you got to stop playing with those toys and sit here, sit still, do nothing, and listen to what I'm saying, which does not work for these new age kids. I look at my son. My son is this. He is prototypical new age kid coming in, and he has to be in motion because his mind is always in motion. He thinks fast. He does everything at a faster rate. But if you give him something to occupy his hands while you're speaking to him, he can capture everything you said verbatim. But if you try to make him sit there and listen, holding his hands or putting his hands down without doing anything, that's like the worst thing you can do for him. But it's just a difference in the time teaching one way versus how kids need to be taught today, because they're so elevated. They come in elevated, right? Yeah.
Yeah, this is true because the children have different names in metaphysics and some spiritual realms, some spiritual communities where the children have come in. They're indigo children, starseed
Yeah.
crystals. They're very, very different. These children have been predicted to come in at this time to help push society forward. So they are different, but the educational systems are still using the old bell curve. They're
Right.
using all the old tools to diagnose the children, and it's pushing the children into what is considered abnormal, which they are not. They are
Right.
normal, but they're the forerunners of the new generations coming in. Also, the children, African American children, I have discerned that well, they're on this planet. Every country has a frequency,
Mm.
and that frequency is unique to the people that are born on that particular in that country. Every country has its own frequency. And so you have African descents, a lot of them in these public schools, African descendants. There's a frequency from Africa, and that frequency should be incorporated into the lingo, into the teachings of the student. It's just like psychology. You need an Afrocentric perspective. Everything needs to be done according to the culture, the race, and the energy from where they come from. But it's not, because everything's European based. So the frequency and everything is different. And so this is why the children in these school systems have not fared well. It's not designed for them, and it's not designed for an outcome for them generally to be successful.
Yeah. We're in such a transitional state that is it's like the call of the moment is for everyone to get aligned with themselves to understand the truth of who and what they are. Because if you can't do that on an individual level, you can't do it on a collective level. And if you can't
Absolutely.
do it on a collective level, nothing changes. So this is why it's so paramount to get to know the who and the what of you as a divine fractal of the source, right? The divine fractal of the source. But I want to get back to your story because one thing I want to highlight the power of your thoughts is when you receive that prognosis, all of those things, in the back of your mind, you held to your conviction, no. I don't care what you say, no. This is, you can say whatever you want, no. And even when they tried to convince you otherwise, they thought you weren't being accepting of what they were trying to tell you, which was reality from their perspective, you said no every time. You never gave in to what they were telling you. And I wanted you to speak to the power of that because it speaks to belief and holding to what you know, because you didn't allow them to trump your own belief and convince you otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah, this is true. And this is a testament to the power of the spirit.
Yeah.
It's a testament to the innate abilities that we have, the will, the will of mankind, the will that is in a human. And I think that I had to pull upon my internal will, which is comprised of fortitude and conviction. And I think all of that came from my teachings as a kid in Sunday school, learning about these things, faith and belief, and then building upon that with other information that helped me secure those ideals and belief that no matter what is said on the outside, I would not receive it on the inner. And that was simply because I knew that there was an inner and that there was an exterior. So I had to rely on my inner understanding and my inner words, that inner voice. I had to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's so powerful because I know the power of belief. And if you had accepted that, then your body would have responded to that, right? In the affirmative. So you would have basically, even if you weren't um, in a position to yield to their prognosis, if you accepted their words, then your body would have followed suit because your body follows your thoughts. So I think that was such a powerful thing to maintain your position of power, your belief in yourself.
Yeah, and it was ongoing throughout the entire process
Yeah.
because with the steroids, it's in the book that I was receiving 500 milligrams of intravenous steroids every 8 hours when I was hospitalized often, at least twice a month.
Mhm.
And it threw me into what was considered steroid induced diabetes. But even through all of that, I understood. It's like the spirit was just telling me. I knew that there are certain foods that I should eliminate so I wouldn't feed that diabetes. And so when I was in the hospital, one day they brought my tray with my food on it, and they had rice on there. I ate rice all the time, but that particular day, my memory brought me back to rice had sugar in it. And this particular sugar was not good for a person that's supposed to have diabetes. And so talked to the nutritionist about it while I was in the hospital. And I said, why would you give me that if I'm supposed to have, you remember, I said, I'm supposed to have. I
Right.
never identified it as being me.
Yeah.
And so they were shocked, but they feed specific diseases, often in the hospital unknowingly. So
Mm.
this is why you have to be a strong advocate for yourself. And another thing, they wanted to give me insulin. They wanted to bring a nurse in to train me. And they were going to use an orange. They broke it down to me. And they were going to show me how to shoot myself in the stomach with insulin. I told them never. I'm never taking it. Sorry. I just can't do it. I won't and I wouldn't. I just wouldn't, because I couldn't believe that I could have diabetes. I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Because if I had believed all of that, it would have pushed me into some type of phase of hypochondriac. And that's what's going on. They push people into that.
Yeah.
And then they help create or expand that specific disease.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's such a powerful thing, because I remember having my own health issue, and I asked the doctor, why did this happen? And she couldn't respond to me when I asked that question, why did this happen? And I had this immediate knowing as I'm leaving out of her office. I'm asking all these questions in my head. I'm saying to myself, well, she's the doctor. She should know. And before I could get that thought out, my guides trumped that. I could hear that voice saying, no, she shouldn't. She treats your symptoms. That's what doctors do. It's your
Mhm.
responsibility to take care of, to be in tune with your own health. And that's one of the things that you brought out in the book, taking responsibility for
Mhm.
your own health and well-being. And I think it plays not only in the health realm, your health and well-being, but it plays across all of life, taking responsibility for your soul, your evolution, your your health and well-being. Everything is your own responsibility. We are all sovereign beings. Nobody is here to do it for you. Nope, nobody is here to do it for you. You are living your life, projecting your own life experience. So it's up to you as the creator of your life experience to take responsibility. And I think that was a key point that you brought out in the book, is taking responsibility and not depending on somebody else to tell you what you need, because being in tune with you is learning to listen to what your body needs and trusting that, acting on that. And that's what I thought was so fascinating in this book. That's what you did. You trusted that. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, we
Yeah.
have to take responsibility. And that is something that the masses just won't do.
Mhm.
Because if you take responsibility, that means from your religious teachings, you've looked to the right or you've looked to the left. That means you're thinking.
Yeah.
Because as I have stated often, if something good happens, people say God did it. And if something negative happens, oh, the devil did it.
Yeah.
But they never ponder, what did I do or what did I not do? If
Yeah.
something good happens to me, I'm so grateful. I thank God for giving me the ability, the innate ability and the skills and the mentality to have been a success. I'm grateful. And if something negative happens, I study me. Where did I make this mistake? I'm not giving any power to a devil. I'm
Mhm.
not giving power to anything outside of me.
Right.
I'm going to take responsibility. I'm going to get in the middle now, and I'm going to make some changes in my thinking,
Right.
because thinking is the basis of all action.
Right. Yeah. Wow. That's living backwards for everybody who operates that way, right? Because it says that the external drives the internal, which is not the case. You live in life from the inside out. You live in life from
Absolutely.
the inside out. To live life with the perspective that the outside or the external is driving you is victim mindset. It's saying that I have no control over the outside forces, but you do. You are creating it all. You are drawing it to you by virtue of your vibration that you hold. That's the way you feel about a certain thing. You're drawing those things to you. So there are no victims in this life. And I think that's something a lot of people don't understand. And it's a hard pill to swallow. It is that ego gut punch, because it means you are drawing it all to yourself. You are responsible for All of it. There are no victims. Yeah, that's a big thing.
Well, see, again, responsibility.
Yeah,
And many individuals just, they don't want to take responsibility for their lives and they leave it in the hands of outside forces.
yeah,
It takes courage. It takes courage to take responsibility and say, this happened to me because of this particular thought that I kept holding. And it caused these actions over here. And this is just the end result of it. Now, I know I created this, but I can uncreate it
right.
with my thinking. But how many people really ponder their own selves? How many people really ponder their thinking? They don't.
Yeah, yeah,
And this is something that we have to teach or suggest or pour into people. We must monitor our thinking.
yeah,
We live in a mental world,
yeah,
and our thoughts must be in alignment with that mental world and what that mental world can produce for us.
yeah, yeah. I think it takes us living it. We have to live it. Everybody has to live it. Those of us who can exemplify it through our everyday lives and allow that frequency and that transparency that we live to serve as the example that might catalyze others into that, and that'll be how it spreads, because nobody can do it for anyone. Everybody is sovereign and needing to do it for themselves. So yeah, I think
Yes,
the best gift we give is operating in that soul aligned authenticity. Yeah.
yes, we almost have to be a shero or a hero and a living example of what can be accomplished.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I think that the prime creator will allow us to live a certain life that people will be able to see. So there are some that will see that life and say, wow, that's available to me also.
Right.
But then there's a great number that will say, well, the devil blesses also.
Mm. Yeah. 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 It is what it is, right? Yeah. But on the heels of standing firm on your beliefs, as you went through those challenges, one thing that I so appreciated that you did is that you started to change your self-talk. You focused on altering your self-talk, and that was in the form of designing your own affirmations. And I want you to speak to the power of affirming yourself, right? Yeah.
And there's much power in that. It's some profound power in affirming yourself and who you are, because we are in charge of every cell in our body. And there's always an internal dialogue going on between different systems and different organs. But if we are never paying attention to the inner, we would never be a part of that dialogue, which we should. We should. And we should be the mastermind over those trillions of cells, but we have not. So to have an affirmation that comes from the inner, it will go back into the inner. And that inner will send the messages to your higher self, to your subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is what brings us our reality. So if I use words that I'm accustomed to, words that have power for me, that would become more pronounced in my being, because my affirmation, what I am affirming, is already a part of me because it came from my innate self. So whatever I say that I am, and I know these words because I've used them, I use terms like bliss. And I feel if I desire and say I am living in bliss, I must fall around joy
Yeah.
and happiness. So that's a word that I use. And
Yeah.
so it comes from inside of me. And if I keep saying it and saying it and saying it and saying it, not only is it going out through my speaking, through the voice, through this throat chakra, it's going out through my emotions, through my heart. It's just going, it's pouring out through every cell in my body because it becomes me. And I fling that idea into the ethers, into the mental world. And there are cycles. It has to come back to me.
Right. Yeah. That's a powerful thing. And I say it all the time. I realized when I started to really open up, I thought I was creating these activations because I started channeling light language and all these things. And I started recording these videos, thinking to myself that I'm recording them to share with the world. And
Mm-hmm.
as I'm recording them, I'm listening to them and listening to them. And what's happening over time is that I realize that I am activating myself because I
Yep.
am listening to my voice, and that catalyzed me to a whole new plane. And now it's something that I do all the time. I create activations, and I always say if they don't resonate with you first, if they don't serve you first, they're for no one at all, because you are projecting your reality. So you are basically adjusting yourself. You are nurturing yourself, loving on yourself, healing yourself through your own words, through your own frequency. You are your best activator, your own best activator. Yeah, that's a powerful thing.
It
A
is. It's
powerful
very powerful.
practice to have, a powerful
And
practice to
that
have.
again, that is a teaching. Your words go forth. It's a teaching in people's religion. Your words go forth and they affect wherever you send them. The
Yeah,
power of the tongue rules over life and death. So I don't understand why they won't look to the left or look to the right. If the power of the tongue rules over life, which is powerful coming into this life, and death, you surely it rules everything in between.
right.
But you have to ponder, you have to think. But if you've not opened up these pathways in your brain, you won't consider these ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why it's so important to share your stories. Like you shared your story in the form of this book, because as people come across content like this in other places, they might have that curiosity sparked, because it'll be something that's so counter to what they so counter to the norm that they have to stop for a moment and begin to think about that thing. And even if they don't think about it today, it plants a seed and it'll come up, eventually, right? At least that's the hope.
Oh, well, some it
Yeah,
will. Every time, everything that a person hears, reads, hears, looks at, or sees,
yeah,
the subconscious takes a picture of it. It's there. And someone else may come along and water that seed, and someone else come and fertilize it. It's not the full responsibility of the seed planter.
right. And that's a whole lesson in itself. Thinking you need to save the world, but really you just do what you do. You planting
What you
seeds
do,
and you keep on doing what you do.
and
Yeah.
not only that, often the seed's been planted. All you got to do is when you'll know with your
Yeah.
inner intuition if you just need to put some fertilizer there. You'll
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Because see, there are people that are going to cross your path. All they need is you to put a little water on it. And
Yeah.
you'll know. You put a little water and you keep going.
Yeah.
I used to think that it was my job to plant the seed, fertilize it, toil the ground, had to do everything. Nah, my guides told me that's not your duty. You're taking on
Yes.
too much. Then if you do everything, what will the other farmers do?
Right.
You've taken on everybody's job.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a big lesson. That was a big lesson for me to learn, because I
Me
was that
too.
one. I was that one. I was and for me it started off, I was a personal trainer, so I was really into fitness. and I was doing my thing, and I felt like I had to save my household, my mom, and get everybody to, working out and eating right and becoming vegetarian, all these things that I'm trying to do. And one day I heard a really great teacher, Michael Tamura. He's a great, profound spiritual teacher that just recently passed over. But he said, it's not your job to fix everyone. It's not your job to save the world. You can only do for yourself. Everybody is a sovereign being, so everybody is responsible for their own evolution, their own state of being. It's not your job. And when he said that, I heard it just right when he said it that particular day. And I
Mhm.
released, it was like so much pressure off my shoulders because
I'm
I'm
sure.
trying to carry everything and do everything for everybody, do everybody's job for them, do their guide's job for them. The guide's like, you don't have to do our job, right? Take a seat and allow yourself to be. And it lightened the load and allowed me to just settle within myself, focus on myself, and allowing my life to be the example versus trying to fix everybody else. That's a big lesson because a lot of light workers think, I'm here, I got to save everybody. This is what I'm here to do. But you're just here to operate in your authenticity, allow that authentic expression to be whatever that is, however it comes, in whatever form it takes. But it's not your job to make sure they get it, make sure they live it and embody it and all of those things and produce results, or all the stuff you try to take control of. That's an ego trip, right?
Mhm.
It is. It is. But I want to get to your walk-in experience because that's the real crux of this story. That it's one of those topics, one of those taboo topics that people really don't understand because the media kind of, well, I won't say, well, I'll say on screen, it's seen as this horror thing where a soul comes in and possesses somebody else and they have no control over, what happens within themselves. They're just totally taken over and annihilated because of this thing that comes in and has all this evil intention. But I kind of want to demystify that a bit because it's not that at all. It could be, in some cases when you have discarnate entities and things like that. But I want you to speak to your experience and how it affected you and caused a shift in your life journey.
Well, that's a biggie. It
Yeah.
shifted every aspect of my being. Um, and I wasn't aware that it was a walk in, but I was very aware of what had occurred when I was in the nursing home and that form that I talk about in the book when it entered my room and so forth. I was aware of that. I never forgot it. It stood out in my mind forever. And there was a gentleman, he was a doctor, and he's a friend of mine, him and his wife, both of them are doctors, and they had been friends for years. But he also was very astute
Mhm.
in African studies. I don't mean African American,
Yeah.
African studies.
Yeah.
And so he and I always talked about very profound information and happenings. And so he knew of what had occurred, but I guess divine timing had to come into play because he broke it down to me and gave it to me from a historical uh, account from Africa. And these things had occurred. And he said that they're called a walk in. Plus, he was an intuitive and a spiritual consultant.
Mhm.
And so he broke that down to me that it had been occurring on the planet, da 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 da. And he said, "That's what happened to you, Linda Wilks." I said,
Mhm.
"Okay." But it just like went in one ear and sort of stayed a few minutes and then it went on out the other.
Yeah.
But when the time was ripe, I was able to ponder it and ponder it. And then more information was coming in about it. And I just began to ponder it and ponder it and I get downloads. Information was coming. And then I had to accept it, but it was difficult to accept something about yourself that is not considered normal.
Yeah.
And so if something is not considered normal, you already know what is considered. And if you talk about it, how people are going to respond to you. But since it was life-changing for me, it's like I was directed into different groups, people, and situations that I never, ever would have participated in. And my journey began. There was a group of, it was an organization, and I talk about it in the book, that I tapped into, and I began to visit that organization. It was a spiritual organization where they worked with people that, the organization was comprised of intuitives, clairvoyants, all types of spirit people that, animal whisperers, all types of people that operated in the higher senses. And so it was deemed confidential when we met, and we had to sign. We couldn't talk about what we talked about, what other people talked about. So I told them my story. And when I told them my story, they seemed surprised, amazed, and honored, which I was shocked, honored to hear my story. And so since these groups had a main group, and it wasn't that far from Chicago, it was in the suburbs, maybe about a 45-minute ride. The woman that was facilitating the group, she asked me, could she tell the executive director? I said, sure. And she did. And then she came back and said, they would like to know if you would speak to a group. And I was like, what? She says, yeah, and talk about your experience. And so something in me said, sure. But I had a sense of apprehension. Here I am getting ready to expose myself. But I had said, sure. So I had committed. Integrity was on my forefront. I had to do what I said I was going to do. So I began to sit down and write and write and write and write what I was going to talk about. And all manners of information began to flow that had happened in my life that I hadn't even paid attention to. It just was flowing. And when the evening came that I was to do this speech, I knew I was exposing myself. And it was not easy. And of course, it was a great number of people, a great number of people. And as I walked toward the podium, there was this Irish woman sitting there close, because there's so many chairs, but she's sitting close to the podium. So I had to walk right past her. She had red hair. Her name was Deb Frew. And she, as I was walking up there to deliver my speech, she touched me. She says, I've been studying walk-ins forever. I was like, okay. So I began to deliver my speech. The entire room was quiet. You could not hear a pin drop anywhere. It was so quiet. And when I finished my speech, this woman was almost in tears. Yeah. The woman that had told me she studied. She hugged me. She says, I know it's the truth. People clapped and clapped and clapped, and they stood up and they formed a line to just shake my hand. Yeah. People were in line crying. It was just it was an unbelievable experience, but it was overwhelmingly an acceptance of who I was. Yeah. That touched me deeply.
Yeah, absolutely.
I exposed myself.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the reasons why I picked this book and why I love this book is because, and I love your story and the way you tell it, because you tell it with such transparency, and it's so authentic. You're so open because you want people to understand what happened to you, because it's not just you that it happens to, right? This is a phenomena that happens to many people. Yeah. And but this book is, everybody who was in that, had the opportunity to hear you speak, I know what they got. I know what they felt, because that's what I felt and that's what I feel. That's what that resonance, lends itself toward. When you had that walk-in experience, though, it wasn't a frightening, it wasn't a scary thing like depicted in the movies. It was an experience that changed your life for the better, because you healed after that energy came in. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, it was not. It was not a fearful experience, a scary experience, or anything. But what I learned through this experience is that the pendulum swings both ways.
Mm.
There's a lot of good and there's a lot of evil in everything, everything. And so for me, it was more than good, it was excellence. And so, with that in mind, I became more and more grateful every day, because it gave me a new lease on life, gave me an opportunity to live, because I know for a fact that I could have been 6 feet in my grave. I knew that. So, this within itself, now it took time for that, for me to get into that understanding, a couple of years, because it took a couple of years for my body to adjust
Okay.
to this new energy in me.
Yeah.
It took time because my nervous system had to be reconfigured to fit. It just took so much time. My mindset, my terminology, a lot. And it was just so many synchronistic events that kept occurring that were putting me in places that I needed to be for this new soul. I I ended up working after several years of this. I ended up working for the federal government. It was just a year contractual agreement. And I met a gentleman there, and every day he would say, "You should come and join Amnesty International." And I was like, "What? Amnesty International?" And he would bug me, bug me, bug me, bug me, stayed on me.
Mhm.
And finally, I succumbed. It took months, but I finally went to a meeting, and it was like a place that I had found so much comfort in doing that work. And we would meet often, and people would ask me in my circle, "Why would you go and and meet with those people and you're not getting paid?" Well, see, I had already been paid.
Mhm.
They didn't understand that, you see.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was able to touch and expand my consciousness to a global perspective. And then one evening, this very man, he was the head of this Chicago chapter of Amnesty International. He had an old football injury and his knee was bothering him. And he said, "The United Nations has invited a speaker." He said, "Would you please go and speak?" And I was like, "When is it?" He said, "This evening." And I was like, I couldn't tell him no, because we had such a good relationship. So I dressed and I went and I spoke. And once I spoke, it is a huge audience. They had it at a university, huge audience. And when I spoke, people asked me to join their different components of the United Nations.
Yeah.
And people, again, they were so interested in. So I did join the United Nations, which even gave me expanded my awareness on a different global, on a global level, but in different contents of what's going on. So now I got amnesty. I'm looking at all these different countries. I'm seeing what's going on, looking at human rights over in this country, that country, this. I'm monitoring the politics. So now I knew that the soul in me had created all of these events to put me where I am. So And it was just marvelous. And I saw the workings of the spirit because my inner self, which was that new soul, wanted to just get to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it had to bring resolution to everything that was going on in my life.
Yeah.
And it did.
Yeah.
When that new soul came in, I no longer saw people as I had seen them prior because I did not have the same emotional. I think my emotional body and my subtle bodies had to adjust also.
Mm-hmm.
And so my emotional body had lost a connection to everybody. And so where a person fitted in with me at that point is what my relationships were built off of.
Yeah.
It was like if I knew you 5 years ago and we've been friends 20 years or 30 years, well, we don't have anything in common now.
Mm-hmm.
I like you, but I see you.
Yeah.
I know I was going to dinner with you every other week, but I can't deal with you no more. So I
Mm-hmm.
had to let people go because we had nothing in common. So what was common was the old soul, and what was new was the new soul. And it wanted to operate on a higher level, which I did.
Yeah.
And it began to draw the people in that were necessary to be in my circle to help
Yeah.
do the work.
Yeah.
So it changed me drastically, made me look at a lot of things in a different way, people, places, everything. I saw it different. Wasn't the same. I was not the same. I had been born anew.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, I've been talking about this for years. I wrote about it, but I never thought that I never even had a desire to be an author.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought of this, never had a desire. But I was in my kitchen one day. My guides told me, we want you to write a book and talk about the walk-in soul. And I stood up and I said, I couldn't say no.
Mm-hmm.
And out of me, I wanted to say no, but the words came out and they said, well, if you want me to write a book, then you're going to create the platform, you're going to open a door, and I'm just going to walk in it. I said, that's the way it has to be done. And it ended up just like that.
Yeah.
They gave me what to say. I would be asleep and they would just give me all this information. It'd be so profound. I'd just get up, walk in here in my living room. Computer's always sitting here. I just start typing.
Yeah.
Or I'd write on, I'd keep Xerox. I just write what I need. Someone will have it for the next day. And this was almost every day. So I knew it was a divine intervention in the book. And I knew that people would be able to feel the spirit of the book.
Yeah.
And so I carried it out and it was easy. And it was so easy. And I was thinking, who's going to publish the book? And so my daughter, who's very intelligent and versatile, I said, you are going to publish my book. She says, I never published. I said, but you can do it. And she did it.
Nice. Awesome.
Everything was provided, which lets me know anytime you set a goal, no matter what it is, and if it's in divine order, all you do is keep moving forward and everything you need is going to come. The people, the places, everything. You don't have to worry. And a lot of people worry about outside material. Oh, you got to have the money. Oh, you don't have to have nothing. All you have to have is the will to follow. You keep following every step. All of a sudden, here somebody is. All of a sudden, here. It's just like, we would call it miraculous, but it's really spirit moving you forward.
Right. That's how it works. You know, it takes walking in that space for a little while in order to build that trust. Because it takes a while it's taken me a moment to really grasp that concept that life should flow with grace and ease. And we think we need to effort in order to make things happen. We need to know the details and we need to script it out and plan and do and all of these things. And what I found is if you just surrender to the understanding of what needs to be accomplished and how it should feel, how you want to feel in the doing of it, surrender in that space, you are met with everything that you need within the moment. And it's nuts how it happens. It's so counter to what we are inundated with and programmed with as far as the way that the world works, but that's how it really works. That's how it really works when you surrender within the present moment, not worrying about the past or the future. You are just surrendered to the present moment. The words come, the things come, everything you need comes, and you have these synchronicities that kind of edge you on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. I'm curious to know how your family took this new version of you, because it's easy to separate yourself from or detach yourself from outside people, people who aren't in the walls of the home or the walls of your family. But how did your family respond to the new you?
Well, I think that many of my family members has the veil over their face, and many still do. And they only see out of their programmed religious eye.
Yeah.
And so, and I have a very, very large family, but only a few have bought my book. Only a few, which told me a lot. And so they never mention what happened to me. They never talk about it, and they won't. And some of them heard somebody say something because my brother has read the book and talked about it. And when they see me, they get all cocky. And they may not have seen me for a year or two. I'm at a reunion, family reunion, and they'll say, "Do you believe in Jesus?"
Mm.
Or they want to know, "Do you believe in Buddha?"
Mm.
And there are a lot of ministers, and they've gotten in the. I've gone to funerals, and I'm sitting there, and they'll get in the pulpit, and it's an opportunity for them to throw something at me because I'm intuitive and I see it. And they'll say, "There's somebody in some of y'all believe in Buddha. Buddha ain't gonna get you into heaven. Y'all going to hell, and it's gonna be hot, 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 hot." I just let them go, and I don't even try to raise their consciousness because they're stuck.
Yeah.
And I used to. And I used to debate when they asked me questions, and I'd be ready for them at the reunions. I'll tell my daughter, I was like, "I'm ready."
Mm.
But I just let them be now because I
Yeah.
understand they're on their own spiritual path. Has
Right.
nothing to do with
Exactly.
nothing.
Yeah.
And everybody has to walk their own path. And so everyone comes into this incarnation with limited understanding or outstanding understanding. So
Mhm.
unless we study the person intimately, we won't know where they are on their spiritual path because everyone has an individually designed path that they must walk. It's like
Mhm.
a road, a journey.
Mhm.
Some people gonna get on your path, some gonna stay, some gonna walk with you, some gonna let you go, but you can't keep everybody there. Because if you did, you'd keep the loved ones there. And so on every journey, every road, there's always a fork.
Mhm.
And this is where I have set my goals at the fork in my road, spiritual road. I set my goals there, but the spirit showed me, "You've been setting your goals too far down. Bring them on up close.
Mhm.
Bring them up close." And my guides have told me, and I'm telling you, this works. They say anytime you have a situation, you say it's easy
Mhm.
and then pay attention. I started saying it's easy. You know how a situation, you be like, "Oh, I say it's easy. And I pay attention. And it's just so easy. It's scary. It's easy.
This is profound. This is profound, and so much of your story resonates with my own. I've gone through like many of these. Like it's so many commonalities there within this story. So
Yeah, it's no accident that we all end up meeting each other somewhere on the path
yeah,
because we have those commonalities which have a specific energy and a specific vibration. And the souls always manage to come together at some time to have a dialogue because it's good for the soul.
yeah,
But yeah, it's just, it's such a dynamic experience. And I have quite a few clients. So when I do workshops, a lot of people, they'll come and they'll ask me, is it in the Bible?
mm,
Because they don't believe anything outside of it. Nothing, because they don't read, they don't study, and they don't research historical accounts of nothing.
mm,
It's hard to find an individual that does. And so I had been asked that question several times, so I put it to my guides. And my guides told me to look at Elijah and Elisha. And so I did. And I found there was a transfer of a soul there.
mm,
And it's really plain. It's very plain. And so I express that and I tell them, there it is. It's up to you, read it.
mhm,
So that eases them and gives, eases that the fear and the pain and whatever it is that's holding them from learning something new. So it's a shame that you have to always have a reference, and it has to be for most African American people. It has to be referenced somewhere in the Bible. Even when I love stones and crystals and
mhm,
rocks.
mhm.
They say, you wearing crystals, is that in the Bible? I say, yes. They belong to the mineral kingdom.
Yeah,
And I have to talk about Jesus. And when he said that the rocks would cry out to him. And I asked him, I said, have you ever heard a rock cry? Jesus did.
yeah,
I said, so if a rock can cry, what else can a rock do? Think about it. What can a stone do? They all belong to the mineral kingdom. And then they look, what about reincarnation? I said, well, is it in the Bible? I said, well, Jesus said if you tear this body down, physical body, he'll build up another. It's sort of like reincarnation. The soul never dies. So if you kill his body, his soul will get another body. I said, so that's him reincarnating. I said, we just don't know what he would come as. Would he be a fat man, overweight? Would he be black? Would he be Indian? Would he be Spanish? What would he be? Would he be very short in stature? We don't know. But he already said it, so I don't know. You tell me.
yeah,
And this is it. These beliefs, people have to push their thinking a little further.
yeah,
But they're so splintered inside. And this is the issue with the masses. They believe one thing, but they live another thing, and they don't understand that thing. So they're just splintered. They're not whole.
yes, yes,
And that splinteredness takes away from the wholeness in every cell in their body.
yes, yeah. Yeah, there's a channel named Sheila Gillette. She channels the Theo group, and she speaks about fragmentation, fragmented aspects, and everybody, yeah, many people are operated in a fragmented state. But there's a guy, there's Paul Wallace, and his work is profound related to the study of the Bible and really unpacking the Bible and what it really means and the translations, how translations have gotten off over history or distorted throughout history. He speaks on that. And also, Eric von Daniken speaks on the Bible. And one thing he said that I thought was really telling, was something that I hadn't even considered. He said the Bible was written by people who didn't even have a firsthand account of the events that were taking place within the Bible. They would tell it, the Bible was written based on word of mouth, things that people thought they remembered. So you know how you can see an event or have an event happen. Many people can see the same event, but they're going to tell that story many different ways. It's going to be interpreted so many different ways. But his point was that you can't take it as the be all end all to life or truth, because there's no way that it can be that, because it wasn't even an eyewitness account. It wasn't even an eyewitness account. So there are many people who do research, who have
Oh, yeah.
researched this thing, who can level set and kind of expand the awareness. So the resources are out there, is my point. The resources are out there. So
Yes, they are. They're everywhere. They're in everybody's face, but nobody wants to see.
yeah.
Even Pope Francis came out and he said the Bible is a metaphor. And so
Yeah.
it's just that people, they want to hear what mirrors their beliefs.
Right.
And their beliefs, anytime any human gives control of the direction of their soul to an outside force, they
Right.
in trouble,
Right.
because they're going to keep you powerless so that they
Mhm.
can be in control over you.
Yeah.
And that's just what time it is, but they can't see it.
Yeah.
Again, maybe this evolutionary process that's going on now, that's raising the consciousness of the people on this planet, maybe it'll help remove the veils off of some of their faces. Or they will just stay in a third dimensional reality and devolve.
Yeah.
Up to them. It's a free will planet.
Yeah. This has been a fascinating chat. And I want to conclude by asking if there is anything that you want to leave us with, any words of wisdom that you wish to share before you leave.
Yes, that we must be mindful of every thought that we think, especially now, and especially melanated people. The planet has shifted into a higher dimension, and physicists have said it has moved into dark matter, and dark matter is melanin. So, therefore, if we've shifted into a higher frequency, higher dimensions, melanated people, what they speak, the beings of light are closer. We're closer to the essence of the mental world, the ethers. So if the more melanin you have, the quicker your manifestations.
Mm-hmm.
So what you say is so important. Even if you don't have melanin, your words go forth quicker in this higher dimension, and you will have what you say. So we have to find a way to pay attention, even to our inner thoughts. When we're not paying attention and those thoughts are flowing, they're creative, because those that are on the inner are more creative, because they're coming up and out with different aspects of ourselves. It's potent. So I'm very mindful we can change this planetary system by thinking thoughts of beauty, love, and light, even over ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's where it starts. It starts with the self first, right? Starts with the self first. So I am so appreciative. Thank you so much for your willingness to have this conversation with me. I love having this chat because I love speaking with people who are open and honest and transparent, and all about just telling it the way they see it from their perspective, not telling us what we want to hear. That's how you give it in the book, is straight, no chaser. That's what I say, because it is. It's in your face, and it's a lot of gems to ponder on, and it's those things that you can stop and go down a rabbit hole and start asking yourself questions about to get a better understanding or to start getting a better understanding of yourself. But thank you so much for being with me today. And it's like sitting and receiving wisdom from the elders. Like I'm a little kid just sitting on the floor listening to the stories, just taking it all in. So I am extra appreciative today. So lots of love. Thank you. And thank you for everybody who stops by to take a look at this wonderful chat we had. And if you have questions or any comments, you can feel free to leave those in the chat section or the comments section of the platform that you may be watching on. So thank you for joining us. And we
Thank
bid
you.
you good night. Namaste.
Thank you. Blessed be.
All right. We are one, fractal of the original spark. And in this present age, do we still find us in many aspects, living behind a veil of forgetting, only to discover that we must make the choice to remember that we are whole and utterly complete by virtue of our very existence alone, with the presence of divine love as the core of the being we are, on earth as within the heavenly realms, with power, with grace, with the will to create our world as we desire, as we simply make the choice to know. But the present is not for the faint of heart. Staring into the face of life summons patience, openness, and a courageous humility, for we can only gain that which we endeavor to move toward. We can only reawaken to that which we choose to see through the eyes of truth. And yet, this stands as the challenge within this illusion, as belief therein draws to the forefront the flawed perception of separation, hindering access to knowing, keeping at bay the all's infinite potential. This is the assignment within this Earth School curriculum. So, our point of focus must be keen, heart and mind coherently aligned, for we will embody the purest essence of us only as we make the conscious choice to dive deep within the infinite waters of self-discovery, to explore and embrace through intention the glorious art of becoming through the subtle mastery of being.